On May 31st, 2025, PSG finally broke their European curse and made it the most dominant victory in Champions League's final history. But if you look at the score sheet, I bet most of us don't even recognize half the names before this season. This is the same club that once spent billions on a squad like this, and now they've dominated the Europe with a team that doesn't even feature a single global icon. So how did this happen? Now, I want you to look at their in-game footage. At first, it may look like the players are positioned normally in their given zones. Take a look at these two right here. They're actually both left and right wingers, while this striker is covering that position, and the midfielder takes up the number 9 role. So, what's going on here? Who exactly is the manager behind this? So join me as we dive into the most insane rebuild story of Paris Saint-Germain. When you look at the overall history of the Champions League, you'll rarely see a French club lifting the trophy. But that doesn't mean they were lacking in talent. In fact, they have produced some of the best youngsters in the world. But the French league never had the same financial strength or global spotlight as the other top leagues back then. So it was often seen as a selling league where players grow and then move on to bigger clubs abroad for better pay and competition. Because of this, clubs like PSG were seen more like today's Leipzig or Ajax, who often made it to the Champions League but rarely reached the final stages. But by the 2000s, something started to change. After looking at the insane rise of their neighboring countries' leagues, the French league was like, that's enough. We have to do something and make our league compete with these guys. And to do so, they began looking for powerful investors who could buy out clubs and transform them. So in 2011, an investor from Qatar showed interest in buying the capital's biggest club. And with the main goal of both the club and the investors was to raise League One's popularity, they chose the path of Ultimate Teams.
As seasons pass, big names continue to arrive at Paris Saint-Germain.
So from Zlatan and Thiago Silva to Cavani and Di Maria, PSG went all out signing big names from across the Europe. And yes, this move brought them all the attention they were hoping for. But that wasn't enough. They wanted to prove to the world that they could beat the likes of Barca and Madrid and become a regular Champions League contenders. So they pushed even harder and spent almost $500 million to sign these two, a move that broke all the transfer records and made global headlines.
Since Neymar arrived, there's been a lot more enthusiasm. We can feel the public has more hope in our possibility of winning the European Cup, because that's really our objective now.
And that gamble almost paid off, as in 2020 they finally reached the Champions League final. But that final showed them a bitter truth.
6 years that I left Paris, so now it's a long time ago.
The only goal which was scored in that final was by their own academy graduate against them, taking away their most attached silverware. But even that warning wasn't enough for PSG to wake up. Just a year after that, they went after this little man.
Football megastar Lionel Messi is now officially a Paris Saint-Germain player.
And with his arrival, PSG were now spending over $1.2 billion on just these 3 players. And on top of that, they brought in more big names to stack up their squad with full of stars. But little did they know, these decisions were about to lead PSG into the most difficult period since their takeover. Just look at this graph. Right after signing all these stars, they not only failed to reach their usual 100 goals, but also started conceding more than ever. To understand that, just take a look at them again. When you have a front 3 like that, who are well established and already proved to the world, apart from scoring goals, there's very little chance they'll track back consistently or press aggressively. So now you have only 7 players to do all the defensive work, and if you use creative midfielders to feed the big 3, you're left with just 5, which is basically an open runway for the opposition to score. So to patch this, PSG had to sacrifice creativity and use more defensive-minded players whose only job was to win the ball back and hold the structure. And this is exactly why these 3 has to do all the attacking work, because the team was too busy trying to survive without the ball. Also, when you look at the natural movement of their front three, all of them tend to drift centrally with the ball. So to maintain the width, the fullbacks were constantly forced to push high up the pitch to provide width and deliver crosses. This made their defensive flank wide open for the opposition to counter.
Occupe les positions les plus offensives. Paris est à l'attaque, mais Nantes contre. Moses Simon.
Also, apart from the tactics, when you open a news article back then, the headlines were more like these than their actual match analysis. Because when you have a team full of big personalities, the manager naturally becomes less important. And that makes it harder for him to successfully implement his desired system. So this caused a major disconnect between the PSG star players, the supporting cast, and the manager.
Klopp is still not understanding that you need to build a team that is a unit, that is one in a whole, not bring it because you bring the best players in the world, that doesn't mean that you're gonna make the best team.
As a result, after suffering back-to-back early Champions League exits, in May 2023, something unexpected happened. PSG's ultras gathered outside the club headquarters and even outside Neymar's house, holding banners in their hands and demanding for both Messi and Neymar to be out. And that was the turning point, the moment PSG never anticipated when they welcomed the takeover, and this changes everything. After that terrifying protest, PSG's board finally decided to quit the Ultimate Teams and play the usual career mode, with a focus of not to dominate Europe for just one season, but to build a legacy that lasts for years to come. And for that, they needed a squad that was young, grounded, and ready to give everything for the badge. And to lead this rebuild, they brought in Luis Campos as the football advisor, a man known for spotting exceptional raw talents and building teams from the ground up. Also, they needed a manager who could be the face of the club, a true leader who everyone's feared and respected. And for that, who's better than the man who once handled the likes of MSN and won the Champions League with them? This is the same manager who once benched Messi for showing poor discipline and didn't back down when Messi refused to train for several days after that. But eventually, they both ended up celebrating a treble together. And for PSG, they really needed that, as French journalist Lauren, who knows everything about PSG, revealed that for a long time the club was run by the superstars. If they didn't want to do something, they wouldn't do it. They would go straight to the president. It undermined the coach, but not anymore. Luis Enrique is the leader of the club. As soon as Luis arrived, in order to tackle Mbappé's lack of defending, he literally called him and said this.
Yo te he dicho que te gustaba Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan cogía de los huevos a todos sus compañeros. Tú tienes que dar ese ejemplo.
And that meeting didn't go well. Just a few months later, the Frenchman publicly announced his decision to leave as a free agent. But as expected, Luis didn't hold back, and he was like, "Our game does not consist in letting Mbappé do what he wants. That was the old philosophy, and it never won anything." And at the time, the media didn't took that seriously at all, and many thought this would be the weakest PSG squad since the takeover. But that departure turned out to be a blessing in disguise for Luis. Within his first 2 seasons, Luis Enrique completely transformed PSG by blending grassroots French talents with a few marquee signings who were known more for their high energy and teamwork. And the unique thing about these were that each positions had at least 2 quality contenders. This was just to bring back more competition within the squad, something the club lacked during the superstar era. So the message was clear by Luis: if you don't give your best, you will get replaced. And this message really took away the control from the players and forced them to get out of their comfort zones. As Dembélé once said about this, that the coach just kept telling us, if you don't press and don't defend, someone will take your place. So we all defend. As a result, just observe this player's movement. He's supposed to be a winger who was just near the opposition penalty box, but then ran all the way into fullback territory just to double up and create a 2v1 trap on the opposition's winger. This would be really difficult to think during the Stars era, right?
Sometimes you don't see wingers coming back so far sometimes. You're there, you're helping Nuno all the time, and I'm like, wow.
Also, along with this example, I want to show you something really weird about PSG. Just look at this. And it's not a one-off. They kept doing this against almost every team in the Champions League. So why they're targeting this area? Just think about it. As soon as the ball goes out for a throw-in, you would see almost all the PSG players pushing up and staying behind all the possible options for the thrower. And because the PSG marker stands just behind the receivers, as the ball comes toward them, they become blind to the pressure. So now the receiver is left with only 2 options: either play a back pass or risk a side pass under pressure. This greatly increases their chances of winning the ball higher up the pitch and creates a counter-attacking situations against an unprepared defense. But this PSG under Luis aren't just great at pressing others, they're also one of the few sides capable of escaping high presses just like theirs. So how do they escape pressure so easily? To understand this, let's take this example. Here you can see Dembélé receives the ball, and he's immediately being pressed by the opponent. But if you look closely, this presser has just left his original position to step out. And this is exactly what Luis looks for, so he instructs the off-ball players to immediately run into that space as a receiver. Now let me take you to a more serious example of this. Here you can see PSG's back three intentionally playing the ball deeper and wider, even towards their last option. And at the same time, the midfielders also drop deeper to support. This pulls the entire opposition's first two lines forward, which again created a visible space in their original position, and with the striker dropping deep to receive the ball. From here, he has nothing but a vulnerable backline ahead with the wingers already in full forward motion. So the goal was clear: if you decide to press us, we'll use your press against you. And this technique was widely popularized by this man.
Opponent has to decide or come here and defend man-to-man, and there is this space.
So by knowing this, you start to get a sense of why PSG's players are occasionally positioned so strangely. But to fully understand it, we need to take a step back and look at Luis Enrique's tactics as a whole. It's just like Xabi Alonso. Luis is a man of balance, someone who values both discipline and creativity. That means he still maintains a clear structure where every player has a role and a defined zones, however, with a bit of creative freedom. But with one condition: their freedom must be selfless and it must benefit the team. So, if you're a player and you notice open space in an unexpected area or your teammate is getting outnumbered, then you're encouraged to make that free run. But if that's not the case, then you stick to your role, hold your zone, and rotate within the structure.
We have a lot of mobility, but if he's in left, he knows what to do in the left. If he's in the right, he knows what to do in the right. If he's in the center, he will know what to do. Even if you have this mobility, you have control.
As a result, just take a look at the positional map of PSG's Kvaratskhelia. He's supposed to be a left winger, but you can see him receiving the ball in almost every zone of the pitch.
We change positions many times, like maybe I'm left winger starting, but I go right side, or I come to play striker. Like we move. I think this movement is very good, that the opposite team didn't understand where or how we play.
So rather than playing a fixed pivot or a classic number 9, almost all of Enrique's players have the freedom to run into any random area, only if it's beneficial for the team. And this blend of individual freedom along with tactical discipline has fulfilled the needs of both the players and the manager, and turned PSG one of the most unpredictable sides in world football.
You've knocked out all the Premier League opposition in this competition.
The League of Farmers, no? We are the League of Farmers, but sometimes, yeah, it's nice.
But while this unpredictability has its advantages, it can sometimes become PSG's biggest weakness. When we look at PSG's setup, except for the two center backs, almost every player is allowed to make creative movements when needed. But even with this freedom, Enrique maintains a strict positional structure during attacks, where he always uses a back three as a rest defense, who stays back all the time. So to complete that shape, you'd often see one of the full backs drop deep, or if they're already pushed forward, a midfielder fills that role. But there can be a moment where both the midfielders and fullbacks get involved in attacks so much that they fail to recover on time, leaving just two players exposed to a counterattack. And that's exactly what happened here. However, you might wonder, why didn't Inter capitalize on this in the final, especially with their world-class counterattacks? And the reason for that was this. This is the exact counterattacking drill that Luis used constantly before the final. Let's break it down. Here, Luis stands near the halfway line and sets up a team of a back three and a pivot which is up against a front four pressers. But you may wonder, isn't that player the fifth presser? Yes, but he stays static in a resting position until Luis calls him into action. So the drill begins with the backline calmly circulating the ball as soon as Luis, who is standing there, blows the whistle. And then the presser immediately frees in their position, while the defender with the ball is allowed to advance and take a shot on goal. But right at that moment, Luis kicks a second ball toward the resting player, who is near the cone. This suddenly creates a real-time counter-attacking scenario, where the back two and the pivot have to defend against these 5 players. And this drill keeps on repeating in a loop until the coach decides to stop. So this constant practice made their backline nearly immune in the final and made it almost impossible for Inter to score. And speaking of the final, when we take a step back and look at the players who led PSG to the glory, this wasn't the most famous PSG squad that we know, but it was the most connected, the most united, and arguably the most complete team the club has ever had. After years of chasing world-class players from around the world, PSG finally realized the most valuable pieces they had been searching for weren't outside, they were right here, in their own backyard. So now they have a chance to build a foundation rooted in its own identity, an identity that develops talent, not just buys it. And for Luis, this win wasn't just tactical, it was deeply personal. In 2019, Luis lost his youngest daughter, Zana Enrique, when she was only 9 years old. He once remembered a moment from 2015 when Zana ran onto the pitch after Barcelona's European victory and planted the club's flag in the grass. So, on May 31st, 2025, when that final whistle blew, he wasn't alone. That flag was planted by every PSG fan in the stadium, in the remembrance of him, with Zana.